So I'm going to give you the names of 5 players that you can buy low right now, or should at least try to do that if you can, and I'm going to explain why. But first, let me just clarify something. It's okay. Yeah, it's okay to trade in week 1 of the season. You're going to have people laugh at you, or they might say, "What, you're already blowing up your team?" Just forget all that. You can trade whenever you want, and why wait? Maybe there's a guy that you wanted on draft day and couldn't get, or maybe you've already got that feeling it's time to buy low because you won't get that chance later. Whatever it is, just ignore what everybody else says. You want to trade, do it. So, with that said, let's talk about some players that are not off to shining starts so far, and maybe this is a good chance to buy low. So far, the Red Sox have gotten all sorts of attention already, and not for good reasons. So let's keep it going. Figure we should talk about another Boston players, not just Rafael Devers or Ceddanne Rafaela who are struggling, or Connor Wong. It's pretty much the whole team. But let's zero in right now on Tristan Casas, a guy who still is one of my favorites. I do think the breakout could still happen. And as far as busts go, he's holding his own there with that group. 1 for 17 on the young season, with 7 strikeouts and only 1 walk. And for someone with his type of power and frame, strikeouts and plate discipline hadn't really been an issue until late last year. And it's continued to be an issue, unfortunately. That's why some people are going to get nervous and maybe not give him enough time to turn it around. Because last year, he got off to a really good start, and then that injury sidelined him for a long time. And after coming back, just wasn't quite the same. So, okay, let's reboot in 2025. But this spring, he did not hit well, and that strikeout rate was over 30%, just like it is already after the first few games this season. But this time, we're going to look at the small sample size as hopefully a good thing, because a lot of times we get carried away and overreact to someone who does really well over a short period. But it goes both ways. Casas has struggled so far after 4 games, and the spring, it wasn't very long as well. I do think it's going to take him a little bit more time, just like this whole Red Sox offense, to get his feet under him. But eventually, I do believe he'll do it. I still believe in the talent here. And I think that this is a good time to buy low if somebody's getting impatient. It might take a little while before you can truly buy low on him or any players. I get it. Every league is different. Every owner is different. But why not dangle out a tantalizing prospect or a young player who is off to a hot start, and maybe you can do the flip? I'm talking like a Kyle Manzardo, a Tyler Soderstrom. And look, I like those 2 players a lot as well, but I still think Casas has got to have a higher ceiling. Now, you may not think you can get a starting pitcher who has just had 1 bad start, but you might be able to get Bailey Ober, because there were a lot of people who weren't too crazy about him going into this season. Some people trying to sound the alarm, think like this is a player who could bust for whatever reason. I think he was being drafted exactly where he should have been. He's fine, he's not the most exciting pitcher out there, especially in terms of velocity. And he will get tagged every once in a while, but especially on his first start. This is just becoming an annual ritual for him. So last year, famously, remember his first start on March 31st, 2024, 1 1/3 innings, gave up 8 runs and 3 homers. Well, this year, he managed to go 2 2/3 innings, giving up 8 runs and only 2 home runs. Now, maybe this is just a Bailey Ober thing, right? He's just going to take his lumps in his very first outing and then just proceed from there. But there's also more to this, because found out afterwards that Bailey Ober was sick, dealing with some sort of illness right before the start. In fact, he was taking an IV. Sometimes it's okay to just say, you know what, Skipper, I'm not ready. You know what, let's go to the bullpen. So he should have been scratched before the start, but he wasn't. And of course, everybody who drafted Bailey Ober really wishes he was. Too late for that. Look, at this point, it's not just a sunk cost fallacy thing. I'm not just saying, well, you already took his bad start, you might as well keep going with him. All right, look, Bailey Ober will be fine. He was fine last year, despite that one horrendous first start and another one later in the year where he got hit even harder, believe it or not, by the Braves. He still kept his ERA under 4 and a very nice whip. Look, this is a guy who has command. He can induce whiffs, get you a decent amount of strikeouts. And it's easy to overreact to a bad week, but that's all it is. It hasn't even been a week, okay? Look, Ober has this 1 start. Some people might be ready to pull the plug. I'm willing to flip one of those pitchers who I think is kind of similar to him, but maybe doesn't have as much upside. I'm thinking a guy like Seth Lugo, who I know was really solid all last year. I'm marking that down as a career year. I still think Ober's much better than him. And a guy like Jeffrey Springs, for some reason, getting a little bit of hype because now he's on a different team in Sacramento, the A's. You know what? Give me Ober over those guys. Sandy Alcantara has 2 starts under his belt, and he's actually been pretty effective. So why is this a buy low? Well, the thing that has been worrying some people in the fantasy community about Alcantara is the innings, the totals, because the rumor got out, which was then squashed, but it still persists because people will believe what they hear, is that he was going to have his innings restricted throughout the beginning, maybe the whole first half of the year, because the Marlins, of course, will trade him. So, as far as that goes, yes, the Marlins will definitely trade him. I don't question that. And so his first start, he was pretty good, but only went 4 and 2/3 innings. Okay, fine. First start of the year, right? After a complete year out, coming back from Tommy John surgery. And then his next start, exactly 5 innings. And again, he was solid both times, gave up exactly 2 runs. Only 2 hits that first start, only 3 hits on the second start. But then the question is that enough? If I have a guy who's never going more than 5 innings, you know what? Maybe there's somebody out there that's more valuable. Well, I have 2 thoughts on that. First of all, they may sort of restrict his innings early in the season because he's still coming back from Tommy John. That's just natural. But look, even if he just goes 5 innings, he could still get you a win. But the other way I really want to look at this is, remember, this is a long season, and realistically, the end of the season should be more important to you than the very beginning. And so let's say, he's on some sort of a limit early on, and then he gets flipped to a contender, a team that needs a starter, a high-end starter, maybe like the Yankees or whatnot. And then he's not going to be restricted because that team got him to win. Wouldn't you rather have the guy who can go 6+ innings for a really good team in the second half than, whatever you can get right now? I'm looking at this as a long-term investment. I think this is the time to get Sandy Alcantara before people start to realize he's going to be super valuable come September. Give me him over some of those other veteran pitchers I already mentioned. And you know what? Even somebody who looked great in his first start, like Jesus Luzardo, he's got that high K upside, sure. But I don't really have any more trust or confidence in him going deep than I do with a guy like Alcantara. Now back to hitters. Boston isn't the only team that's got some hitless batters, and I'm going to look right now at Mason Wynn in St. Louis, who to start the season 0 for 14 hitless in his first 4 games, and as of right now against the Angels, not doing too much better on Tuesday night. He's 0 for 2. So there's the obvious regression thing where you can't do worse than a 0 batting average. Eventually he'll get on base and get some hits. Look, Mason Wynn is going to be fine, but also I'm going to say that I will go ahead and flip one of those other shortstops who I don't think have nearly the upside for my roto categories for a guy like Mason Wynn, who legitimately has 30+ steal upside, maybe even more. And I know it's not ideal that he's hitting last in the lineup a lot of days, but you can still get some steals and score some runs there. And I will have to admit that the top of the Cardinals order, led by guys like Lars Nootbaar, are producing better than I expected. And so while the base hits have not fallen in yet, one thing that is encouraging for Wynn, who you don't think of as a very hard hitting guy, not a big guy, but his exit velocity so far is up actually by 5.5 over last year. And he is swinging and missing a whole lot, right? He's not even making contact, but that is not a concern with Wynn. Last year, he had a nice 17% strikeout rate. Don't know why he's going through this early in the season. He'll be fine. He'll get out of it. We got to remember, too, Wynn is a guy who hit 15 home runs just last year. I think a 15-30 season, maybe 20-30, is still well within reach. Give me Wynn over some veterans at that same position like a Tommy Edman, a Dansby Swanson, guys who are off to a pretty good start already and are more highly regarded, but I think Wynn is going to eventually blow them out of the water in terms of fantasy. Then let's add one closer to the mix here. I've been talking about Seth Halverson a lot, especially toward the end of draft season. He's one of those potential closers to keep an eye on. I think he is the closer. Again, one save does not a closer make, but hey, the Rockies have 1 win and he's got that 1 save. And he needs to be the guy, not just because he's the best that they have in that bullpen right now, but he is legitimately a good closing option. He's a guy who was already hitting 100 on the radar gun. Great stuff. I mean, again, a very small sample size to draw from in terms of major league experience, but he's got the makeup and now he's got the opportunity because it looks like he's going to be getting the ball in the ninth inning. So if you're looking for cheap saves, somebody who maybe everyone isn't convinced is going to help them in that category, I say get him now before people find out. Like I said, it's never too early to start trading. You can never trade too much. As long as you're finding ways to improve your team, that's what it's all about. And that includes being proactive on the waiver wire and also stashing prospects. I talked about some of my favorite guys to add now before they get the call, before they break out. I call it beat the breakout. And the latest one is right here.